The two men who stepped out of the black, unmarked SUV looked like they had been assembled from a kit designed specifically to intimidate. They were both large, thick-necked, and dressed in black polo shirts with an officious-looking, but ultimately, meaningless eagle crest embroidered on the chest. They wore tactical pants and heavy boots, and they moved with the swagger of men who believed their authority was absolute, and their power was derived from the man who signed their paychecks. They walked up the long gravel driveway to my family's ranch house, their boots crunching with a rhythm that was completely alien to the quiet Montana morning. Sound of intrusion in a world of peace. I was on the wide, covered porch, a steaming mug of strong black coffee in my hands, watching the sun burn the last of the mist off the surface of the vast, tranquil lake. It was a rare moment of profound peace, a quiet weekend at the one place on earth I could truly be myself, a world away from the crushing pressures, the endless meetings, and the political machinations of my life in the state capitol. "Mr. Cole," the taller of the two asked, his voice a low, gravelly sound that was clearly meant to be menacing. He was holding a document that looked vaguely official, a sheaf of papers and a cheap-looking portfolio which he held out as if serving a royal decree. "I'm Alex Cole," I replied calmly, not getting up from my old, weathered rocking chair. "Can I help you?" "We have a court order here, sir," he said, tapping the portfolio with a thick finger. "A writ of seizure, signed by the board of the Blackwood Bluffs Homeowners Association. You're being evicted for illegal encroachment and property line violations. You need to vacate the premises and come with us." I stared at him, my mind, which was accustomed to parsing the most complex legal language, struggling to process the sheer breathtaking absurdity of his statement. A court order signed by an HOA board, an eviction from my own land, a demand that I come with them. This wasn't just a threat. This was an attempt at a full-blown, albeit laughably illegal, arrest and kidnapping. These were not police officers. They were thugs in costumes, sent by a man who had finally and catastrophically overplayed his hand. "Let me see the order," I said, my voice even, betraying none of the cold, quiet rage that was beginning to build deep within me. He handed it to me. It was a work of amateur legal art, a document clearly downloaded from a questionable legal template website. It was filled with intimidating phrases like whereas, heretofore, and immediate legal remedy. It accused me of unlawful encroachment upon the newly developed Blackwood Bluffs community and cited a survey I knew to be fraudulent, as its primary evidence. At the bottom, where a judge's signature and an official court seal should have been, was the arrogant, florid signature of the developer himself, Warren Blackwood. I almost smiled. This was the culmination of a 2-year war of attrition. It's a battle of wills between a man who believed his immense wealth made him the law, and me, the man who actually was the law. 4 or 5 days a week in the state capital of Helena, I was not just Alex Cole. I was the Honorable Alex Cole, the Attorney General for the state of Montana. I was the chief law enforcement officer and top prosecutor for a state that spanned over 147,000 square miles. My days were a maelstrom of high-stakes court battles, of advising the governor on delicate constitutional matters, of overseeing the Montana State Bureau of Investigation, and of fighting the very kind of corporate corruption and predatory behavior that was currently standing on my porch. This ranch, this sprawling 1,000-acre piece of heaven, was my sanctuary, my escape. From that world, it had been in my family for 4 generations, a place of profound peace and memory. The only place I could truly shed the immense weight of my office and the constant threat assessments that came with it. I came here on weekends to be anonymous, to drive my old Ford pickup truck, to mend fences with my own hands, to simply be Alex, a son of this land, a man who belonged to this landscape. I kept the ownership in a quiet family trust to maintain that privacy. My desire for peace, however, had been misinterpreted as weakness by my new and incredibly wealthy neighbor, Warren Blackwood. He was a ruthless developer from California, who had bought up the adjacent 10,000 acres and created the Blackwood Bluffs It's an ultra-exclusive gated community for the super-rich. It's a place of gaudy mansions and unnatural water-guzzling lawns. My ancestral ranch was the one piece of land he couldn't acquire. The hole in the donut of his real estate empire, and it's authentic. Rustic existence was a personal affront to his ego. The conflict had begun the moment he broke ground. He wanted my land, specifically the pristine, untouched shoreline of my private lake, to build the back nine of his championship golf course and a private marina for his residents. He had started with a series of multi-million-dollar offers, delivered by his slick lawyers, which I had politely refused. The ranch was not for sale at any price. It was my family's legacy. My refusal was a challenge he could not tolerate. His response had been a campaign of escalating legal harassment. He had commissioned his own. It's a deliberately flawed survey that fraudulently claimed a 100-acre swath of my land, including the very spot where my historic ranch house stood, was actually part of his development. Based on this manufactured evidence, he had filed a series of frivolous lawsuits, claiming I was an illegal squatter on his land. He had tried to block my historical water rights, complained to the county about my unsafe and dilapidated barns, which were in fact historically preserved structures, and had done everything in his power to bog me down in expensive legal fights. He assumed I was just a simple rancher who couldn't afford to fight. Back against his army of corporate attorneys, each of his legal attacks had been summarily dismissed in court, thwarted by my own, far deeper understanding of the legal system, and the impeccable, century-old deeds to my property. State courts had, in fact, sanctioned him for filing frivolous claims. But each one had cost time and energy to defend, a constant, draining battle. Now, he had escalated from a legal war to a physical one. He had hired these two men employees of his own Blackwood Security, given them fake uniforms that vaguely mimicked those of county constables, and armed them with a fraudulent legal document. They were not here to serve papers. They were here to intimidate, to bully, and if necessary, to physically and illegally remove me from my own home. The two officers were advancing on me now. The taller one, the speaker, reached out to grab my arm. My reaction was not born of anger, but of a cold professional necessity. I moved with a speed and efficiency that belied my calm demeanor, a fluidity that seemed to shock them. It was not a punch or a kick. It was a simple, firm wrist lock, a technique of leverage and pressure points that I had learned from my own state, provided security detail during a mandatory training session in close quarters protection. The man's eyes went wide with a mixture of shock and searing pain as his wrist was immobilized in an iron grip. His forward momentum completely and humiliatingly neutralized. I would advise you, in the strongest possible terms, not to touch me again, I said, my voice still quiet but now laced with an unmistakable and very real menace that had been honed in the highest courts of the state. The other man, seeing his partner so effortlessly controlled, hesitated, a look of confusion on his face. It was in that moment of hesitation that I pulled out my phone. They probably thought I was calling the local sheriff, an act that might have been useless, as I knew Blackwood held significant sway with the local county officials through his generous political donations. But I wasn't dialing 911. I was dialing a number on my secure, encrypted state-issued satellite phone, a direct line that bypassed all local networks. The quiet, anonymous rancher was gone. The Attorney General was now officially on duty. The call was answered on the first ring. "Director," I said, my voice calm and authoritative, speaking to the head of the Montana State Bureau of Investigation. "It's Alex Cole. I'm at my ranch in Flathead County. I'm currently dealing with an interesting situation. I need you to dispatch a state-level response team, including a tactical unit, to my location immediately. Appears we have an active case of two individuals impersonating law enforcement officers and attempting a kidnapping, all at the behest of Mr. Warren Blackwood." I paused, my eyes locked on the two thugs who were now staring at me, a dawning, abject horror on their faces as they processed the titles I had just so casually dropped. "And yes, Director," I continued, my voice as cold as ice, "I believe we finally have him. It's time he's crossed a line he can never uncross. I want the full weight of the state brought to bear on this situation, immediately. The two thugs were momentarily stunned into paralysis by the titles I had just invoked. The State Bureau of Investigation. The Attorney General. These were not the names of local officials who could be swayed by Warren Blackwood's money and influence. These were the titans of the state government, the very pillars of the legal and security apparatus. They clearly thought I was bluffing, a desperate, insane act of a cornered man. But the sheer, unblinking confidence with which I spoke had planted a seed of terrifying doubt in their minds. The one whose wrist I still held had begun to tremble, his tough guy facade crumbling at that moment. Warren Blackwood himself, who had been watching the drama unfold from the comfort of his own tinted black Escalade parked 100 yards down my driveway, decided to make his grand entrance. He emerged from his vehicle, a smug, satisfied smile on his face, ready to take control of the situation and pass judgment on the troublesome landowner who had dared to defy his vision of progress. He was a king arriving to survey a battle he believed his soldiers had already won. Well, Mr. Cole, he began, his voice dripping with condescending triumph as he strode onto my lawn, his expensive leather shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. It seems my legal team has finally managed to get your attention. I trust you are now ready to be reasonable and discuss the terms of your departure from my property. He had not yet grasped the new reality of the situation. He was a local real estate tycoon who had just tried to illegally arrest the state. He was a man who had brought a knife to a gunfight. He was about to find out that I had brought the entire army. Before I could respond, a new sound filled the air, a sound that was completely alien to the quiet rural landscape. It was the high-pitched, unmistakable whir of multiple helicopter rotors growing closer at an incredible speed. Blackwood's smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion. He had not called for a helicopter. Within minutes, the sky above my ranch was filled with a convoy of official vehicles that made my heart swell with a grim sense of satisfaction. It was not a single local sheriff's helicopter. It was two black, unmarked helicopters belonging to the Montana State Police, which began to circle overhead like patient, watchful hawks. On the ground, a procession of unmarked state sedans and a large, black armored Suburban came roaring up my driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust. State troopers and SBI agents in tactical vests, their sidearms holstered, but their hands ready, emerged and quickly and efficiently secured the scene. Forming a perimeter, the response was not just swift, it was overwhelming, a show of force designed to send an unmistakable message. The lead SBI agent, a man I knew well, the director himself, strode toward me, his face a mask of controlled fury. He saw me, and his demeanor immediately shifted too, one of profound official respect. He gave me a sharp, formal nod. "Mr. Attorney General," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Are you all right, sir? You were notified you were in a hostile situation." He then turned to a completely, utterly dumbfounded Warren Blackwood and his two thugs. He introduced me not as Alex Cole, the quiet rancher, but with my full, formidable title, his words landing like hammer blows in the stunned silence. "Mr. Blackwood," the director began, his voice dripping with a cold, formal sarcasm, "do you have any idea who this gentleman is? Allow me to introduce you. This is Mr. Alex Cole, the Attorney General for the great state of Montana. It is the chief law enforcement officer for the entire state. He is, in essence, my boss." The color drained from Warren Blackwood's face. The sweat beaded on his forehead. The slow, dawning horror of his catastrophic miscalculation washed over him. He wasn't trying to intimidate a simple, stubborn citizen. He was trying to illegally arrest the top prosecutor in the entire state. The man whose job it was to put men like him in prison for the kind of predatory business practices he had built his empire on. The director, now acting on the direct and no doubt furious orders he had received from the governor's office, began the formal legal process of dismantling Blackwood's world. His two fake cops were immediately and roughly arrested by the real police. Their cheap imitation uniforms, a pathetic mockery in the presence of the real thing. They were charged with impersonating law enforcement officers, assault, and Felony attempted kidnapping. The director then turned his attention back to Blackwood, whose arrogant swagger had completely vanished, replaced by the trembling fear of a man staring into the abyss. "And you, Mr. Blackwood," the director said, his voice cold. "You are facing a raft of charges that will keep you and your lawyers busy for a very long time. Conspiracy to commit a felony, commissioning a private illegal security force." And he paused, letting the final charge land with the weight of a death sentence. "Intimidating a public official and attempting to interfere with the office of the Attorney General." That last one, as I'm sure your expensive lawyers will tell you, carries some very serious federal implications as well. But I wasn't finished. I was not just going to let the SBI handle it. He had tried to steal my land, my peace, my family's honor. I was going to use the full, crushing weight of my own office to ensure he could never threaten anyone in this state again. I made another call on my secure phone, this time to the head of the state's Department of Environmental Quality, Susan. I said, my voice calm and professional, "It's Alex. I need you to open a full, top-to-bottom environmental impact audit on the Blackwood Bluffs development in Flathead County. I have reason to believe, based on my own observations, that there may be significant violations of our state's water and land use laws, particularly concerning the runoff into Mirror Lake. Consider this a formal request from the Office of the Attorney General. I expect your top team on site by morning." I made another call. "Director of the State Revenue Department, please." "John, it's Alex Cole. I need a full corporate and personal tax audit conducted on Warren Blackwood and all of his associated businesses going back 10 years. I want you to look for everything to make sure Mr. Blackwood is as good a corporate citizen as he claims to be." This was the final nail in his coffin. I was not just seeking punishment for his actions today. I was systematically and legally dismantling his entire corrupt empire. Brick by brick, permit by permit, tax return by tax return. The story ends, as it must, a few months later. Warren Blackwood, stripped of his titles and his influence, is out on a multi-million-dollar bail but is ruined, facing a mountain of state and federal charges. His development is a legal and environmental disaster zone. Its permits and certificates of occupancy indefinitely suspended pending the outcome of the state's numerous investigations. His power in the valley is shattered, his name now a whispered cautionary tale among the state's elite. I am back at my ranch. It is quiet. The air is thick, not with tension, but with the sweet scent of pine and fresh-cut hay once more. I receive a call from the governor, who apologizes profusely on behalf of the state for the incident, and for the failures of local governance that allowed a man like Blackwood to flourish for so long. I look out at my ancestral land, the fields. Stretching out in the golden afternoon light, the lake a perfect, undisturbed mirror of the vast Montana sky. My sanctuary was threatened by a man who thought his wealth made him the law. In defending my home, I was forced to remind him what the law mile actually is, using its full, crushing, and righteous weight. The peace I had sought in this place, the escape from the burdens of my office, was finally, truly, and permanently secure.